Welcome to 360's 2020 Proving Grounds. You know, back last winter, January 21st, we were in an open horse arena with a dirt floor just 10 months ago, and we were running a combine and sprayers and planter, and we were doing a lot of live demonstrations and showing you up close a lot of the different technology that we use here at 360 Yield Center. But at the same time, a lot of things have changed. When I think back to that very time, this is pre-COVID, and I look back and I see where the grain prices were. So this is right here where we're talking in that end of January. January futures are in that 402 range. And then things started to spin outside of yours and my control. And I think when I think of 2020 growing season, yes, different than 18 and 19 again, but kind of one of those things that you felt a little bit out of control. And today I'd like to talk about the things that you and I can do where we're always optimistic. If there's one thing I like about U.S. corn farmers is that they never give up and they're always in the fight. But as we looked at how the year went, and I say if you walked and ran into me at the chocolate candy aisle at Farm and Fleet and you asked me how my season went, I would tell you it was a good season. But the reality was it wasn't best ever. Not the best ever corn yields, and definitely not the best ever soybean yields. When I think back to how we were from 18 to 19, just kept ratcheting up the success that we were having. Not that I'm disappointed. I mean, we had some bean fields that went 88 bushels as a field average. And we had some over 300 bushel trials on corn, but the overall farm was definitely down. And some of those things, I think, were actually that Gregg lost focus. And so today, I'd like to talk about, through this Proving Ground event, this is something that you and I can learn together, and we can focus on the things that really make a difference. Yes, I'm really excited that January corn just peaked at 430, maybe go higher, maybe it'll soften up a little, but it put you and I in a totally different spot when it comes to our frame of mind. Because once again, you and I now can have profit for our families. But at the same time, how do we know next steps? What did we learn this year? And throughout this whole Proving Grounds event, you and I are going to be able to share the things that we did in the field of our new technologies, whether it's 360 Dash or 360 Wave or the Y-Drop or the Bandits. We're going to show you firsthand. That's what Proving Ground means, is proof of concept through the research that we do. And so I'm thankful that we had diversification in our operation. So about a third of our acres, we're really fortunate, we're in seed corn. And that makes quite a difference for us. It takes a lot of pressure off on the harvest time. That always starts early, about in August, so we actually can get a lot of tillage done because seed corn's corn on corn. Yes, it's under irrigation. Probably one of the best profit generators for us, so when it comes to specialty crops, is our pumpkins. Problem is we just don't get enough acres, under 300 acres of this. But I like the diversification and what it does for us. So we're going to jump in and talk about this season, things that happened, things that were different, and maybe where Gregg left his guard down just a bit, and I've maybe forgot in the heat of the battle a few of the things that are just good old-fashioned common sense. When I think about how the season started for us, it definitely was wet and cool right out of the gate. We had a little bit of a window in April, and some of the neighborhoods started. I was tentative. I didn't like those cold 41 and 42 degree mornings. And so we sat by and we said, let's wait for a better opportunity. Now, one of the real advantages of having diversified as far as being out and where we're spread out, you take our farming operation, I just put some of our corner fields, so we're out 30 miles from corner to corner. As you can see down here in the corner, that's a 30 bushel advantage to us when we talk about a 3-week dry period in August. That made quite a difference. And so where some of the areas got rain, so down here to the south, we picked up some timely rains. And that's where that same hybrids from the north field to the south field was exactly 30 bushel difference on a field average. So I don't mind maybe being spread out a little bit. There's always challenges though. You think about how we're going to move equipment. And so as we go through our Proving Grounds event here, you'll understand why we like our 360 tanks to be narrow. You'll get to see why we're pulling that little Gator and Sprint, and then talking about how to have enough planter power that we do take time out when it's going to get really cool and maybe a forecast of rain coming in. We don't plan into rain events. And so those are things that we talk about is, do you have enough planter power? How many acres per row are you going to challenge? Do we need to maybe have an older second planter so we can start soybeans early? So those are things that we learn as we go in. One of the things I think are real key to our operation is understanding which hybrid is the one we're going to take to the dance and which one are we going to leave on the sideline. And we talk about it each year because usually the day you put the variety plot in is always usually one of the better days, and you think, I really ought to be getting more acres today. And so I like the fact that we take the time. In this case, we got 28 different hybrids that we're going to challenge here. And for us, we plant them at 2 different rates. So as we go down this field, as we're coming this way, we're at 37,000. When we loop at the end and come back, we're at 33,000. And so we're going to learn a lot about each one of those hybrids. What are they like? Where are they going to perform the best? And so to me, that separates the men from the boys. And you can see it here. From the top hybrid, which went at 304, to the, and it's not by no means, that stone hybrid by no means is a bad corn, 261, but 43 bushel spread, and you look at the net. So when I talk about the net, this is at $4 corn, and you, with the corn actual input, subtract it off. So what that corn was per acre for us is 2.3 acres per bushel. And so you can see the actual net, the difference it makes. And when we talk about $153 an acre for our family farm, that's real. Those are things that we want to pay attention to. And so we always say, this might be the best day of the spring for us. These 28 hybrids that we're going to look at next year, so as I look at these results, that Double Pro hybrid there flat out works. We look at this winter here, the Double Pro hybrid, and it topped the plot at 304 with over $1,000 net. Those are things that I want to pay attention to. Probably the thing that I've been missing somewhat, though, is why aren't we doing it more on soybeans? Half of my acres are in a non-GMO. And I like the non-GMO beans because they work for us because we get a $1.50 premium per bushel on top of what your price is. So that makes a lot of sense to me. Yes, a little bit more input on the chemical side, but I've not been testing to the extent that we do on the corn hybrids. So when I think about that for years, a Pioneer hybrid, 33T60, and I mean it's a good one. And we've had it for years and years. So it was yielding an 81.7 bushel in this trial, and we did 6 large blocks of replication against a brand new Pioneer hybrid, 34A50, and it came out and it averaged 94.8 across those, that's the average of those blocks. And I see that and I say, wait a minute, we're talking almost what, 13 bushel here? And a $12 now, if we get to $12 with our premiums, $144 an acre. So maybe Gregg needs to start thinking about, yes, well, we're early bean planting, taking the time to switch out and bring in some different hybrids and start to put them to test. Because those are things that make quite a difference at the end of the year. In the heat of the battle, sometimes it's a little tough, isn't it? And it takes a lot of energy, and it takes some thought, and it takes some additional horsepower to bring all that stuff to the field and get it placed right. So, as I think though, probably one of the main things that I learned this year is that we know that the 5 days after planting are really, really crucial. So it's not always about the day you plant. And we've talked about this a lot. So when you come in and you put this little seed in, it's really about what? 36 hours from now. That's what we worry about. So when it takes its first drink of water, that's what's going to set the stage for the whole year. And so April went by. Yes, we started planting beans in April 2nd, and we were done before the end of April with the beans, still sitting inside looking for that ideal sweet spot for corn. And as it came, and I just put up this week of May. Every year I tell you there's 1 week that you probably shouldn't plant. And for us in Central Illinois, that week of May 11th, that Monday, 12th and 13th, was a bloodbath for us from this standpoint. The forecast was predicted to be good. Yes, that weekend was cold on May 9th. We'll talk a little bit about that. We actually froze some beans. But coming into Sunday, it was starting to warm up. The forecast looked good. So planters in our place started to roll on Monday because Wednesday, the weather service was saying a high of 75 degrees. So they're saying it's going to get up to 75 degrees with a low of 54. And I'll plan into a weather event that's going up. So Monday and Tuesday, planters are rolling, plots are going in. Variety plot went in. And what happened Wednesday? On the 13th, the high of 58 and low of 41. So they missed it. And all of us can make mistakes. This gave Gregg a lot of heartburn. It was not 75 and 54 for lows. It was 58 and 41. And the corn did not respond well. I knew better. I knew that we had to make sure that we have the ideal. So I would just say for 21, I'm going to be passionate. And I want to drive this point home to you. It's not about the day we plant. It's the next 5 days that set the stage for some really good yields. So we've talked about it year after year. We talk about what is the value of knowing what you own. So we've talked about a variety plot that gives you the right hybrid with the right traits and a lot of yield punch. But the seed itself, what do you own? You can see here I'm checking some Pioneer 1197, and we're sending it into the lab, and we're going to do a test and say, is this seed itself designed that it can take some cold weather? And so we were out there planning on May 11th and 12th, and Tim and the engineering team started to put out a really detailed, large trial of closing wheels and starter and 360 dash and 360 wave, and a lot of effort was going into it. And I was so proud of them. I will wing them by, with the planter, and there they are out there, and they're getting it done. At the same time, the hybrid that they're putting in came into our seed house late, an extremely high yielding hybrid, brand new to our area. And guess what? Gregg didn't have a saturated cold test. So what is a SAT test? Saturated cold germ test. It's just simply where you send it to the lab, you send in 200 seeds, you send in a gallon baggie like you see doing there. They're going to hold it for what? 7 days at 50 degrees. Because we're talking here is 55 degrees is the sweet spot of this water. As it goes through the pericarp, if it's 55 or above, that seed will take off and it will perform extremely well. In this case, we saw that on that Wednesday when it took its first drink on the 13th, it was 41 degrees. Well, that's a large difference. And so the lab tested at 50. On the 8th day, they warm it up to 80 degrees, and then they just count. And they tell you the saturated cold germ. Now, we know on the bag, a lot of that corn will come in at 95% cold germ. This is saturated cold. This is where they wet it. And so if I have a score from 91% and up, I'm pretty happy. This year, that corn that you see right here, come back to me at 97% saturated cold germ. I call it an Eskimo. It can grow in any kind of condition. It just so happened that the corn that Tim and the engineers were putting in come back to us, and this is after the fact, because I was watching this corn emerge, and I was getting really, really stressed, and I said, what was our cold germ, saturated cold germ on this, guys? And they said this one didn't get sent to the lab because it come in late. So they're out there planting it on May 12th. On May 18th, we get back from the lab here, the test of that, and it's got a 67% on the cold germ. Was I surprised? No. Why? Because I could walk the field. The field was dropped at 35,000 in all the trials and all those strips. We were lucky if we had 30,000 plants up. We were losing stands. And so as I look at this test, and there's three things that I test when I send a seed in. I want to know the saturated cold germ testing. In this case, it was 67. Yeah. Would it perform okay and it's warm? Absolutely. If you'd plant that and we had a 60-degree soil, not a concern at all. And I'll show you some results of that. But in this case, 67 would be a red alarm for me to say that one needs to wait till later in May. Or the next 5 days, we know that we're in a trend where it's warming instead of cooling. And this is a lesson I know well. We just flat out got caught, and it cost us. What about lower down? You see other things. They got accelerated aging. That just tells you was that corn kept over for a year, the aging of that. I always like when I write a check to have new corn, but there's times, and that's the only variety you can get, you'll take corn that's been kept right. And then they also give you, what is the condition of the seed coat itself? Is it cracked? In this case, when you look at this, I would be concerned. And so they're giving you what? They're talking about a light cracking on the seed coat. They talk about medium, and then they talk about severe. So in other words, we had a 67% of the seed coat had some light cracks. They said, I'm sorry, 62. They said 25% of it had some medium fractures in the pericarp. And then here at the bottom, they had a 13% severe. What does that tell you? That tells you you're not going to use starter in the seed trench on that seed. You'd be wanting to put your starter off to the side. If you don't, with this kind of a pericarp score, you're going to struggle. You're going to have stands that you're extremely disappointed in. And so this just gives you and I knowledge. Knowledge always drives the best decision. In this case, Greg didn't have the knowledge and time, and Tim and his team are out doing a lot of hard work, and it's going to catch up. Look at some of the examples we've showed you in the past. At the proving grounds in 19, we showed you a 44% cold germ seed. High yielding. But that does not like a cold drink. And you can see the difference. It was 66 bushel less when it was planted in a cold weather event compared to a couple weeks later when we planted into a warm weather event. Look at the 99% cold germ corn. In the cold yield, it was 275. In the warm, it was 276. Now, that's even. In other words, that seed at 99%, it can take diversity. It can take that adverse cold condition. What's it look like? This will make your stomach tight. So when I'm out there digging in the plots that we planted, we put all the work into, and every time we had a gap and we dug it open, we know that that cold drink, in this case, shocked that inside of that seed, and it's just going to spin out the spike, and he's not going to find the surface. And it's no mystery. When you walk in the field, you can see those. Some plants are delayed, and most times in this case, they're missing. And so we did this plot over. Luckily, this field was large enough that we could come in. So on the May 12th planting, that plot averaged, all the plot averaged 235. We waited for conditions to get better. We come in and plant that exact same seed right next to the first plot. And look what the difference is, 26 bushel difference. Is it a seed problem? No. It was a Gregg problem. Not having my team on top of getting the results back, yes, it did come in late, but at the same time, there was no excuse. Then you add in on top of that cold week on May 11th, 12th, and 13th. Guess what happened on Friday night? We ended up getting an inch of water. This is the very plot. You can see that Saturday we had another inch, and Sunday and Monday more rain again. So we ended up with 3.1 inches of rain on top of seed that doesn't like a cold drink of water at 41 degrees temperature. You can say, well, Greg, it's not your fault. The forecast changed. I'm just going to tell you that from now on, in my mind, written in stone, is what are the next 5 days, and the best of our ability, we react. So we reacted. It's been years since I brought out the rotary hoe, and we hoed corn for 3 solid days, and it worked. There are times when I would just say this: if you're going to hoe early. Most times, this ground condition here where I'm hoeing was just fit after that 3 inches of water to get in there without tracking it. But the individual wheels of that hoe are doing the fracturing job, and you can see that. You can see where the spike is here. So we got a spike on that corn, and you can see that we're still, almost an inch, probably 3/4 of an inch below ground yet. So the rotary hoe coming over the top was fracturing that crust, and it paid us big. Probably the best I've ever seen a rotary hoe work, to be honest. And so it was a matter of getting active, getting out there quick, and staying on it. But as I watch this spike come up, I get pretty excited. What about this root? I can't help but mention it. I get excited when we talk about corn production. Look at this radical root. You can see it coming out of the seed here. This is the first root out. So in this case, you're looking at this little radical, and look how long he has grown. You can see I dug him out with my jackknife. So as he's growing out here, yes, we're talking about seed crusting, and we're looking at the spike, but you can't ignore when you see, so the spike's coming up here, and we know we're going to start to get some little seedling roots out here, but this radical root is growing out here. And I tell you all the time, this is all about starter. This guy here is looking for P and K, but it's phosphates that he's going after. And so I get so excited, and I can't wait to share with you throughout this whole event when we talk about technology such as the wave, 360 wave, where it's going to create the ideal seed trench for easy emergence. But what I'm really talking about is right here. Where is the actual starter going to be placed? Right over to the side. And so as we think about starter being placed out the back of wave, 3/4 of an inch over, now we're going to have a band of starter fertilizer, and all of a sudden we're going to have an all-star plant. And so those are things that matter. And so I couldn't help but show you that when I saw that radical root. I just had to throw it in. You'll see a lot of it throughout the 360 event as we go in depth. It's different when we used to do the summer events, where 500 of you are in the field with me, and we have you on the semi-trailers. It's hard to show a radical root like that. But this case, we can get in close, and we can see the real benefit. So as we think about the growing season, and May wasn't a whole lot different than April. We struggled to find the perfect days. Yes, we had a little bit of a window on May 26th and 27th, and then it was June 1st. And so as I think back over 19 season and 20 season, I think I can say this. One thing I've learned is that corn has a wider window. In other words, we have a wider window, and we can get out that June 1st at times, and we can survive it. This corn you see here in my 2020 is in the June 1st time frame, still yielding pretty good, where soybeans, I think, is the exact opposite. When we think about soybeans, it goes the other way. The window is pretty narrow, and so when we think of a narrow window, we think about getting them out early and getting them out ahead. But corn, we've proven that the hybrids of today can handle that June 1st. Notice, though, this is about one of our last picked fields. Notice the moisture here, 27. So the 2020 growing season here in central Illinois, what happened on October 5th? Right when this corn was just about the black layer. So on October 5th, we come in here, and we got down to 29 degrees. And so that corn froze. And when you freeze corn at black layer, pre-black layer, at just when it's at that 31% and it freezes, now you extend the dry down. It's common for our farm to see 5 points of moisture drop per week in the heart of it, of harvest. You'll be picking, 26% corn, and all of a sudden, if in a week it's 21, pretty soon it's elevators telling me it's 18, and we're dumping corn at 17 right into the dry pit. And that stresses me a little bit. I like picking higher moisture corn, but at the same time, when we get here and it's almost November and we're still picking 27% corn, that just shows you that the fall was just a little bit of a pickle for us. And so those are things that we know that we got a wider window. In the last 2 years, I've planted a lot of seed corn and a lot of commercial corn in June 1st with some really good yields. At the same time, I really hope that in 21, we can keep that frost just a little more extended. I'd take it maybe October 20th to 25th instead of October 5th. But what about different things? We talk about soybeans. And what I've noticed is where we have taken and we have put the time and effort into pattern tiling, it comes April 1st, the last week in March, these tiled fields that are patterned are ready to go early in the year. And so one of the things that we've really focused on in the last several years on our farm is how do we get beans out early and all for the right reasons. It starts with having the foundation of the correct soil moisture. And so yes, you're looking at almost what, $950 an acre in a tiling program in this field, but the return has come back to us very, very quickly from this aspect. We can go in those fields. In this case, we were in this field on April 2nd, putting in soybeans, our first go, and we went hard. From April 2nd to the 9th of April, we got a ton of acres in, and then by the 21st of April, we were basically done. And we had the beans in before actually the first acre of corn went in. But is it with risk? Absolutely. Look at this little guy. He went in on April 2nd, and now we're at May 9th. So this is a year of frost for us. So on May 9th, I didn't sleep very well that night. So on May 9th, we came in here Saturday morning, and this right here you're looking at is 29 degrees. It got between 30 and 29. I was up early, long before dawn. I was out in the bean fields looking at them, had my thermometer. I'd actually covered some spots in the row of large boxes and piled dirt around them because I wanted to say, if we frost it, how much damage were we actually going to have to replant? Because that's the danger. I told you we started on what? We started on April 2nd. We started going hard. I'm talking day after day of 300 acres a day putting in. We're going in here and we're putting beans in with confidence. And then you get this, and it starts to make you think, how did it end up? Luckily, very, very well. So what was the effect of that hard of a hit on that plant? We talk a lot about stress can generate more yield in soybeans. In fact, a lot of you will roll early beans. You'll actually take a roller and you'll roll them. What are you trying to do? You're trying to stress them. And you want this plant to branch right here at the ground level. Look how this guy, this is frost damage. You can see the swelling. He froze, and it actually made 2 branches. And that's a positive thing. Because when we think about 2 branches, we're going to increase pods. You look at the pods here difference on these 2 planting dates. So we had one field that the seed beans didn't come in from Argentina until late. They hit our place on May 25th, so on May 26th they went in. And so they're a 3-1 maturity. We come here to a 3-3 maturity that was planted on April 2nd, and you look at the pods on that plant, and you can see the kind of pod load we're carrying from early planting. Let's talk about it a little bit. What does early planting really do? Why is all the fervor? Gregg says, well, if you have, 1,600 acres on your family farm and you're trying to get that done with one planter, I would recommend you buy a second planter and you start beans early, and then you just do your normal corn routine that you have developed on your system. But if we come in early and we start planting soybeans, there's quite a yield advantage. And now we are in our 4th year and we got some really solid results. So let's just say this is April 1st up here at the top. So we know this is the 1st of April, and let's just put June over here. Let's just, I don't know, we can just put June 1st would be another planting date. What am I drawing here? I'm drawing a time chart, and we know what? With solstice, we know that night length drives bean yield. So the longer the nights when a bean plant is growing, the protein in the leaf triggers flowers. And flowers is the name of the game here. Flowers turn to pods. Pods turn to yield. So as we plant early, we know we have a risk of that May 9th freeze. And the reality is what? Most of these companies have 100% replant. Not that I want to go out and replant again. I do like running planters, but I don't really want to replant. But we know that there's a night length in here that's going to change. The shortest night of the year is what? June 21st. Just like December 21st is your shortest day. The longest day is June 21st, so your shortest night. So as you come down here, let's just pick an imaginary date for Greg. Let's just say it's May 5th. After May 5th, the night length is shortened up enough. These beans will not flower until it gets over here and the nights start to get shorter again. Well, this might be July 1st. So over here on July 1st, finally, the nights are getting long enough again that that plant starts to flower. So in between here, we now have plants this tall that's starting to flower. Let me show you what they look like. I got a little ballpoint pen here, and look right here. You can see the flower on that plant that's no taller than a ballpoint pen. So in other words, this field was planted on April 2nd. We got ahead of night length. We started to set flowers, and we're going to create more pods. If we take that plant a little later in the growing season, and you can see it here, if a tape measure, my finger's on the soil line, if in 4 inches of the soil, I have 4 and 3 bean pods. Compared to here, later, we're what? 8 to 9 inches before the pods actually start on the later planting. And so you look at the difference here. So this is 3 weeks difference from here, April 2nd to April 22nd. Look at the difference on the pod length, and you look at the yield. And year in and year out, I would tell you in our 4-year average now, of 4 years of planting early, by the 4th year here, we would be close to 12 bushel. 12 bushel, same varieties, just planting date, due to the fact we're getting the flower earlier and put more pods on. Shorter nights, plant and the protein in the leaf starts to say, uh-oh, it's going to stop in shorter nights. Longer nights, it says, I need to start flowering, and all of a sudden you got these guys flowering at a really early stage. So this is real. Once again, we're talking well over $100 an acre in your program. So it's something to start to think about, say, well, maybe I can put together a second planter so that we could have one planter planting beans early and then another team going on corn when the right day comes. We think about the weather, and you say, well, Greg, in the past you've talked about early planting beans excitingly being in the 90 to upper 80s. And we go into this year, and that's what I said. If you ran into me in the candy aisle at Farm and Fleet next to the chocolate, and you said, what kind of a year did you have? I'd say good. But best ever bean yields we were missing. And we put up all the rainfall for the last 4 years. So the black line here is this season. So we obviously had a drought back in 2012 here, and you can see the drought line. But look at this stage right in here. in that August time frame. You look at August here, the whole month of August, there was no rain. And you look at that and you say, well, wait a minute, would that have an effect? And yes, it did. What I saw for us was our 4-bean pods. So we talk about a 4-bean pod here, where we have 4 beans in it, versus 3-bean pods. And we had a number of them on those early planting, but that drought knocked out the 3rd or the 4th bean in some of those pods. And I believe we were on the 90s. We had the 90 bushel beans coming our way, and it ended up being in the upper 70s. And Gregg's not mad about 78 bushel beans and 80 bushel beans. I'll take it. I just took some of the fun out for me. As hard as we've worked on our system, and yes, we use bean treatment. I would never plant beans on April 2nd without understanding the sudden death syndrome. And so we have all the treatment in there, a 4-way treatment. We're protecting them. And so thinking we were going to be on the 90, we were in the low 80s to upper 70s, and I'm thankful. But at the same time, next year, I'm excited about taking another step. Now, we also had the ability to have some irrigation on soybeans. And so we had beans that were under irrigation in the same field where the water wasn't. And you look at the difference, and this will make you stop and think. You can see me harvesting these plots here. And so the irrigated beans were going almost at 80, 78.8. And the beans right next to them that weren't watered were 64. This was a 3.6, a Stein 3.6 variety, a good one. And there's 14.5 bushel due to just 3 3/4 inches of water. Less than 4 inches of water put on a bean field created 14.5 bushel. So it's something I'm going to take a lot of look at in the future and say, is this a variable that I need to be able to manage? To me, farming is all about control. And so that's why I like tiled fields so much. Get water off in the spring. I really like to have the ability to put water back on in the growing season. And when we think about that dry August in central Illinois, and then you take a look at the corn, and it's no mystery to you that there's going to be a yield hit. And these soil types here that are lighter soils, more of a 1.5 to 2 organic matter, not a 3 or a 4. And you can see that plant's talking to us. And once again, where we come in and did the research, and where we were able to put on right at 4 inches of water for the growing season, 65 bushel difference. And I look at that, and I get excited about 21. Because I'd say, you know what? In our arsenal, as we do the trials and we do the checks, as Tim and I think about where are we going in the future on our farm, I realize that nature can beat on us. And then we realize that nature's much larger than Gregg can ever be. And even though we're spread out, like I showed you, 30 miles, we have rain some places and not other places, then this kind of technology starts to really interest me. And I can say 14.5 bushel beans and 65 bushel more corn. That might be the step we need to take on our family farm to get the profitability that we're looking for. So stay tuned. We'll continue to work with this research, and we'll show you more in the future. Now, besides just being a grain farm, we also dairy. And we always are looking at cutting cost. You know, when you dairy, one thing you don't worry about is having to take a pickup to the bank to haul in your checks. It's just a hard road, isn't it? And it's fun, and it's a lot of work, and it keeps Dad out of trouble on weekends because I'm always on chores. But one thing I didn't like is our bedding program. Sawdust, you all know that if you're trying to build a house this year, that wood went 3x what it used to be before. So it used to be 1,000 board feet, $500. It was now running $1,500 this summer. Well, the sawdust went through the roof. It's over $3,000 a semi-load. So I told our team, we got balers. We're going to go out and bale off what we're doing corn on corn. I'm going to bale off residue. Realizing what microbial activity is, also realizing in a cornfield, and we'll talk more in depth on this throughout this event. We're going to talk about when you have bean residue or corn residue on a cornfield. And as this little guy starts to grow here, and he's putting out his roots, and as he starts to grow, we realize the microbial guys are going to feed on the residue. And they're going to use nitrogen to break down that residue. So Tim said, Dad, if you're going to bale stalks, I want to put it out on a trial where we do corn on corn each year. I want to remove the residue. So now I have warmer soil, much warmer soil in the spring, much less residue for microbials. But since we're a dairy, we have the ability to come in and put manure right back down. So this field is where all the bales came off of. And you can see we're knifing manure in here out of the dairy pit at about 4.5 inches deep. So now I've done what? I've taken care of a lot of this large stalk residue that Mike and his team are going to really have to munch on. And by bringing manure back in here, boy, do I have these guys excited. Because now they're going to go straight to the buffet, and these guys are going to multiply by 1,000. So when it warms up in the spring in Tim's trial field here, with manure just being knifed in, with the bale residue being taken off, I'm excited about what kind of results we're going to see. Because you and I understand we don't have to be farming very long, and we understand what the cost is to running out of N late season. As you watch throughout our series here, we'll show you real numbers. Not that this is bad corn. By no means, when you and I are in the 230 raising corn at 230 bushel, I'm excited about that. But I get a lot more excited about the 254 to 255 corn. And so, yes, that has about 100 and some pounds of nitrogen in that dairy manure, besides the P and K and all the other micronutrients. So we'll be coming in that field, and we'll be using here, we'll be putting our Y drop to work. We'll make sure, we'll be testing that for our soil scan. We'll know for sure, is Mike and his team satisfied, and do we have happy corn? Just remember, you can never have a bad day in corn production. And so throughout the whole video series, the virtual video series, we're going to be fine-tuning our operation and helping you tune yours, that not only do we keep really happy corn, we're going to keep the dollars of inputs in check, and we're going to make sure we're not spending more than we need to, but that we're maximizing yields. And at the end of the day, this is my goal for you and for I. No matter what nature does to us, no matter how many decisions Gregg would like to redo in 2020, next year is a new year. And I'm excited. I can't wait. I sometimes seriously wish we could start the planters running right after harvest, because I can't wait to take another swing at the bat. Because for you and I, as we go through this virtual video tour that we're going to have in 2020 here of our proving grounds, we're going to take you with 360 technology to a whole new place. And I can't wait to run into you at the candy aisle, Farm and Fleet, next fall, and you and I can bump elbows and say, things looked really different this year.